Awareness plus control shift. Most people don't realize this, but the reason your life hasn't changed isn't because you lack potential, it's because your habits are stronger than your intentions. You wake up with plans, you tell yourself today will be different, you promise that you'll start, but when the moment comes to act, something inside you hesitates. And that hesitation feels small, almost invisible, but it's not. It's the exact point where your life either moves forward or stays the same. Because every time you step back from that moment, every time you delay, every time you tell yourself later, you reinforce a pattern. Not once. Not occasionally. Repeatedly. And repetition is what builds identity. You don't become what you say you want, you become what you consistently do. That's why your life right now already reflects the truth. It shows you what you prioritize, what you tolerate, and what you avoid. And once you see that clearly, you lose the ability to pretend that things are just happening to you. They're not. They're being shaped by your behavior, your reactions, and the decisions you repeat without thinking. That realization is uncomfortable, but it's also the moment where control begins. Because if your life is structured by your actions, then changing your actions, even slightly, starts to reorganize everything. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But immediately. The problem is, most people wait for motivation before they act. They think they need to feel ready, inspired, or confident before they move. But that's backwards. Your life doesn't improve when you feel motivated. It improves when you take responsibility for what you've been avoiding. And that responsibility isn't about fixing everything at once. It's about recognizing the small moments that actually matter. The moment you choose distraction instead of discipline. The moment you choose comfort instead of growth. The moment you walk away instead of following through. Those moments are not random. That's where your future is being decided. Quietly. Repeatedly. And once you start paying attention to that, something shifts. You stop looking for external solutions and start looking at your own patterns. You begin to see that the control you've been searching for has always been there. It just requires you to act differently. To stop negotiating with yourself. To follow through, even when it's inconvenient. And that's not easy. It forces you to confront the gap between who you are and who you say you want to be. But that discomfort is not a problem. It's a signal. It means you're finally facing reality. And once you face it, you have a choice. You can continue repeating the same patterns, or you can start making decisions that align with the life you actually want. And that's where everything begins. Not with motivation. Not with inspiration. But with responsibility. Pressure plus self-confrontation. You already know what you're supposed to be doing, and that's what makes this harder to ignore. This isn't a lack of information. It's not confusion. It's not that you need another plan. You know. You've known for a long time. And yet, you're still not doing it. That's the real problem. Because every time you say you'll do something and don't, you don't just lose progress, you lose trust in yourself. Quietly. Gradually. And over time, your own word starts to mean less to you. You start making promises you don't expect yourself to keep. I'll do it tomorrow. Just this once. It's not a big deal. But it is a big deal. Because those small compromises are not isolated. They accumulate. They shape how you see yourself. They tell you exactly who you are based on what you repeatedly allow. And if you're honest, you've seen the pattern. You delay what matters. You distract yourself when things get uncomfortable. You look for something easier when effort is required. Then you step back and wonder why nothing is changing. But nothing is changing because you're not changing. And this is the part most people avoid completely: you are not stuck. You are choosing this. Not in some dramatic, obvious way, but in small, repeated decisions that feel harmless in the moment. You choose not to start. You choose to stop when it gets difficult. You choose comfort over progress again and again. And those choices don't disappear. They build. They reinforce themselves. They become automatic. Until eventually, they define you. Not your intentions. Not your goals. Your actions. And that's the difference between people who move forward and people who stay in the same place for years. One group acts despite resistance. The other negotiates with it. And every time you negotiate, you give yourself a way out. You lower the standard. You weaken the commitment. And over time, that becomes your default. Discipline isn't about doing more. It's about doing what you said you would do, especially when you don't feel like it. That's the entire shift. Not when conditions are perfect. Not when you feel ready. But in the moment where you would normally walk away, and you don't. That's where something real is built. That's where you stop being the person who talks about change and start becoming the person who actually creates it. And it doesn't require a massive transformation. It requires consistency in the small actions you've been avoiding. It requires you to stop lying to yourself about what matters. Because deep down, you already know. The only question is whether you're finally willing to act on it, or continue repeating the same cycle and calling it something else. Structure plus execution plus control. If you don't put your life in order, something else will, and you won't like what takes control. Because life doesn't pause while you figure things out. It keeps moving. And if you're not directing it, then your habits, your impulses, and your avoidance patterns will direct it for you. That's what chaos actually looks like. Not dramatic failure. Not sudden collapse. But a slow loss of structure where everything becomes harder than it needs to be. Your environment becomes disorganized. Your thoughts become scattered. Your actions become inconsistent. And then you feel overwhelmed, not because life is impossible, but because too many things have been left unaddressed. That's why the most practical step you can take is simple: start with what you can control and put it in order. Not everything. Just something. Your space. Your schedule. Your commitments. Because when you organize even a small part of your life, you send a signal to yourself that you are capable of control. And that matters. Because real confidence doesn't come from thinking differently. It comes from acting and seeing results. Even small ones. And once you experience that, you can expand it. You can take on more responsibility, more structure, more challenge. And that's where meaning begins to show up. Not in avoiding difficulty, but in confronting it voluntarily. In choosing responsibility when you could choose comfort. That's what builds strength. Not ease. Not convenience. But the willingness to take on what is necessary, even when it's difficult. Most people get this wrong. They think the goal is to eliminate struggle, to reach a point where everything feels easy. But that's not how it works. The goal is to become stronger than what you're facing. To become someone who can handle pressure without collapsing, who can stay disciplined without needing constant motivation, who can move forward without perfect conditions. And that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when you stop avoiding what needs your attention. When you confront what you've been putting off. When you stop asking, how do I make this easier, and start asking, how do I become better? Because that question changes everything. It shifts your focus from the outside world to your own development. It puts the responsibility back where it belongs. And once you accept that, you stop waiting for change and start creating it. You build something stable. Something structured. Something that doesn't fall apart when things get difficult. And that's the point. Not to create a perfect life, but to build a life that can withstand reality. At some point, you have to stop listening and start acting. Because none of this changes your life unless you do. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now. Start with one decision. The one you've been avoiding. Follow through, no negotiation. Because that's where your life begins to shift. Right there. And if this resonated with you, if something here made you stop and think. Thank you for staying all the way through. This is what Uncharted Decision is about. Not quick motivation. Not empty advice. but real conversations about how we take responsibility, face reality, and build something better, step by step. If that's the kind of direction you're looking for, stay with us. There's more ahead. Start now.